All right. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. I am excited to kick off our first Citizens Input Committee meeting of 2025. Thank you all so much for being here. I know the weather is starting to ramp up to be a little gnarly. So at this point, I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Can I get an attendance roll call?
Absolutely, Chair. Richard Farias. Here. Lawson Picasso. Here. Diana Aguirre Martinez. Frank Gonzalez. Julian Villarreal. Dr. Adelita Cantu. Here. John Kelly. Here. Tom Corser. Here. Maria Nelson. Here. Andra Clapsaddle. Stephen Bonet. Here. Bob Zapata. Here. Aaron Stein. Christopher Fullerton. Here. Sarah Villarreal. Here. Frank Dunn. Here. Peter Onofre.
Here.
How many members do we have in attendance?
11.
11. With 11 members in attendance, we have quorum, Chair.
All righty. Thank you so much, Chris. And now I will have you lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance.
Fantastic. Thank you. There it is. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now have Melissa Carrillo do the invocation.
Thanks, Christina. We'll first get started with a safety message. I'll review the evacuation procedures so that we are all prepared to be safe in the event of an emergency. If you hear the fire alarm, follow the instructions announced through the PA system. If asked to evacuate, use the glass door to exit outside and verbally alert others at the McCullough-Brooklyn bridges. Our security team will be watching and will notify the appropriate emergency services. Lastly, we'll also have employees nearby who are trained to administer first aid if needed. Safety is top priority, and while we hope this information is never needed, we want to ensure we are prepared. Now, will you please stand with me for an invocation? For a quiet moment, I invite you to express gratitude for our health, for our families and our friends, and for the opportunity to come together as a community today. We honor our Citizens Input Committee for the responsibility that they bear. We wish them success today in making decisions with wisdom and humility. We are reminded that we are all stewards acting on behalf of our customers. May we accomplish our goals together with that singular purpose in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, for that. And I just want to take a personal point real quickly following the invocation. This morning I had a chance to visit with a resident of San Antonio, and she shared with me some of the concerns that she had as we lead into this current weather, inclement weather. And she shared that her concerns come due to her having lost her cousin during Storm Uri. And I just want to take a moment, a pause to reflect and also give an observance for those that we may have lost during Storm Uri, as well as also highlight and express a call to action for all of us to ensure that we are letting our residents know to please stay safe and warm during this time. So the cousin, his name was Ruben Gardenas, and he deserves to be recognized due to losing his life during that time. So I'd just like to take a pause. Thank you. All right, staff. At this time, I now open the floor for public comment, and I turn the meeting over to Cristina Guzman, Manager of Local Government Relations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll now open the floor for public comment. We do have 2 people signed up for public comment. We have Alberto Lopez and Eric Rodriguez. Both will be speaking on the agenda items about the overview of the last MUC meeting. So first, we'll have Mr. Alberto Peña come up to speak. We'll have a timer set. Mr. Peña, you'll have 2 minutes. Yeah, right here's perfect.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alberto Peña, and I am here to very simply talk about the concerns concerning the private meetings, marketing with industry, specifically in relation to subcommittee meetings. I think that subcommittee meetings should be made public, and that the procedural information and also the bureaucratic documents that are available in these meetings for the members must be made public. I think this is important information for the community in order to ground themselves in the decision-making processes, not only of the board, but of the committees and subcommittees. I think that this is really important because people need to understand why these decisions are being made. The rates that are proposed for specific groups of people, specifically in regards to the green LCP large energy rates that are currently being looked at, people need to know these things because these are crucial in terms of the long-term health of the organization, of CPS Energy itself, and also city infrastructure. Without people having this knowledge from the subcommittees of rate, finance, and business, people don't have the proper grounding to understand why these decisions are being made. I think that the more information we have out there, the more public resources we have out there, and the more links and the more websites we make in order for these subcommittee resources to be accessed, the better we are as a community and the more involvement we can have here. Really, I just think that, well, information is power, and specifically speaking to you, Madam Chair of this committee, I really do request that you look into it because there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't know, and that if they don't have that information the next 2-3 years with the rate hikes that are currently being proposed, with the rate hikes that are currently being instituted, then people don't have the knowledge necessary to plan their lives around that and around the big events that many of our community members are having right now.
Thank you, Mr. Peña. Before we move forward, I do need to make a correction. We do have 14 members in attendance today, just for the record. We appreciate your time. Our next speaker will be Eric Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez will also be speaking on the agenda item dealing with the Municipal Utilities Commission.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Rodriguez. I'm part of Southwest Workers Union. I'm requesting that the rate committees be made open to the public. As someone who works directly doing outreach regarding rate hikes, I can confidently say that the community is largely unaware that these discussions are taking place. Over the past 2 years, we have hosted free CPS Energy utility clinic signups to help community members get enrolled into the ADP program. During our outreach efforts, most of the people we talk to are completely unaware that the rates have already passed and that these are still like ongoing discussions. I think since 2022, we've had 2 rate hike increases. Most of the people we talk to don't even know that that happened. So if the meetings are made open to the public, I think that would be more beneficial to the community.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Rodriguez. We did have a third person sign up for public comment, and now we'll open the floor to Jasmine Herrera, who will be speaking on the MUC item as well. Ms. Herrera, you'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Jasmine Herrera. I'm with the Coalition for Dignified Housing and Historic West Side Resident Association. I'm here to ask if y'all could make these meetings public so that residents may know and tell their stories about what they are going through, the hard financial times that they're going through, especially myself as well. One of the residents in the West Side does not have his light on, and he doesn't have a job, and he takes care of his wife and his son, and they both are on dialysis, and it's very hard for him to keep his job. And as well, his house is also falling apart, so it's very hard for him to keep warm in these conditions right now since it's cold. And that's why I'm here. I'm here so that way you can tell the public, that way they could tell their stories. And I'm very happy to share that. Not happy, but I wanted to bring that to y'all's attention, give people a chance, you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Herrera. That concludes public comment, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you for those that took the time to come out for public comment. Alrighty, next we have the subcommittee reports. In December, we held a full CIC meeting to end the year. Therefore, there were no subcommittee reports for the meeting. Is that correct? Confirming? Okay. Okay, and now we have a presentation. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Manager of Local Government Relations and introduce today's presenter. And I believe it's State Public Policy Agenda.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Our presenter today will be Zanir Ali. He is our Federal and State Relations Manager, and the presentation he'll be giving us today is on state public policy and the agenda for CPS Energy. Zanir.
Hey everyone, my name is Zanir Ali and I am the Federal and State Relations Manager here at CPS Energy. Thank you all for the opportunity to be with you here today. Our next Texas legislative session begins on January 14th, and it's clear that energy and infrastructure will continue to receive significant attention. During this presentation, we'll be taking a look at our state public policy priorities and how we engage both internally and externally on the legislative process to ensure CPS Energy is well represented at our state capitol. Last legislative cycle, we organized our state public policy priorities into 3 pillars. This session, we've added a 4th, safety and security. A caveat I'd like to note before proceeding: while we've received some of the interim committee reports and agency reports, many of them are still forthcoming. And that also stands for our state leadership priorities, including from Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and the incoming Speaker of the House. As such, some of these technical policy focus areas within each of these pillars might change depending on those releases. To understand where the legislature will focus its efforts, we can take a look at the bills that have been filed to date. Members have been filing legislation since November, and already 2,200 pieces of legislation have been filed. With that, let's dive into the pillars. And these are not all encompassing, but the primary lens we will use to assess proposals happening. The first being customer affordability and impacts. Above all else, we will assess and seek to mitigate any impacts of any and all legislation on our customers, including cost impacts. We anticipate legislative discussions on bills to support access to demand-side energy resources, looking at methods for customers to understand their energy usage and reduce their consumption. And as the legislature determines what to do with the $20 billion of surplus, as we've done in past sessions, we will seek opportunities to the benefit of our utility customers. Next up is the municipally-owned utility MOU business model. We anticipate similar proposals from last session to transfer decisions currently made at the local government level up to the state, some of which will be directed directly at municipally-owned utilities and others that will unintentionally capture us. To take this into perspective, last session, a quarter of the bills that were filed were aimed at limiting local control. This cycle, we've already seen several bills to prohibit or alter the use of public funds for lobbying. We also anticipate continued conversations from last session on general fund transfers and preventing environmental, social, and governance policies, or known as ESG, from being a part of public pension conversations or decisions. CPS Energy will continue to oppose proposals that negatively impact our governance structure or our ability to make decisions locally that are in the best interest of our utility, our customers, and our community. Next up is reliability and resiliency. As a continuation of the legislative conversations on strengthening the electric grid, lawmakers are now turning their attention to focus on the overall transmission and distribution system. We anticipate engaging in proposals related to the existing transmission infrastructure, such as storm hardening and preparation and response, as well as smart grid technologies, and the build-out of new transmission lines, perhaps using high-voltage lines. Tied to the transmission topics, there will also be potential for proposals addressing the significant demand coming from large loads like data centers, as well as the integration of new technologies such as advanced nuclear reactors and further market design changes at ERCOT. At the distribution levels, we expect ongoing conversations on undergrounding power lines, replacement of older above-ground lines, and vegetation management requirements. CPS Energy has transmission projects currently at the PUC and has been engaged in interim legislative and regulatory policy activities tied to these topics. We will continue this engagement through session to ensure we support the evolution of our electric grid, our major initiatives here at CPS Energy, such as Vision 2027 and Horizon 2050, and our existing commitments to provide reliable, safe, and affordable power to our community. Last up is safety and security. Our new pillar for the 89th legislative session captures priorities in both the physical and cyber security arenas, ensuring our employees and our assets are protected. For example, during Hurricane Beryl restoration efforts, we saw threats made against utility workers as they worked to restore power. Already this cycle, there's been legislation filed to implement criminal penalties for people who threaten or harm utility crews in this manner. The primary area we foresee engaging in this area are gas line pipeline safety and damage prevention, grid resiliency, and emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, AI. Following the last legislative session, temporary committees were created to examine AI and the role it should play in Texas, the goal of which being to create a framework for AI adoption. CPS Energy will engage in proposals that support the continued physical and cybersecurity of our systems, operations, customer information, and our community. At the December 16th board meeting, our CPS Energy Board of Trustees approved a resolution with the following guiding priorities based on our main pillars. CPS Energy will support proposals that will assist and protect customers and mitigate potential impacts to our energy bills. We will oppose proposals that will negatively impact local decision-making authority through our governance model. We will support proposals that enhance generation resources and transmission infrastructure and align with our commitments to our community and major initiatives. And finally, we will support proposals that protect our employees and our assets while integrating new information technologies and addressing physical safety issues. Reviewing and assessing the impacts of legislative proposals is a utility-wide undertaking. The federal and state relations team, in coordination with our executive leadership, identify and train internal subject matter experts across our legal, operational, and financial business units to serve as legislative analysts. This session, we will have over 75 of those subject matter experts helping us. These individuals are a crucial component of our public policy development process, providing valuable insight and expertise in their field of work, which in turn helps us ensure we're providing legislative offices with accurate, concise, and practical input on bills going through the legislative process. And in addition to ensuring we are meeting legislative offices' requests for input and insight, we proactively seek opportunities for our CPS Energy colleagues and executives to join us at the Capitol and engage directly in the process. Frequent communication and real-time updates are provided through various channels. We have feedback mechanisms, including our online bill tracking tool and standing meetings for information sharing. Our proactive communication keeps everyone informed and engaged throughout the process, allowing for collaboration and adjustments in our approach to be made as needed. And externally, we value our array of industry and community partners, particularly that with our city owner. Working together, we can build and work within coalitions to amplify our messages and support the greater San Antonio community. Then I'm gonna skip forward a couple just to show, these are some of the important dates that we're looking at here. Bill filing, as mentioned, started on November 12th. The legislative session will start next Tuesday on the 14th. The last day for new legislation to be filed is going to be March 14th, and the last day of session is June 2nd. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that y'all might have. And I'm just going to go back because I assume the questions will be right there. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Zaire. As a member of the Power and Technology Subcommittee, I'm interested in the nuclear technologies development, and I understand that there's a proposal. There was a working group that started working on the development of the nuclear small modular reactors. So the process of incorporating that into what is a fund that is being proposed to be developed specifically for that. Was CPS involved in that working group? At what level? And what opportunities are there to be involved as it's being developed? And I'm going to tie that question to the advocacy for the Texas Energy Fund itself and how it did provide for funding for more gas plant development or natural gas development. Did we have the opportunity in the transition of the purchasing of those natural gas assets of benefiting from any of those funds, or can we benefit from those funds? Is there a legislative option there that we could be pursuing even as we develop more dispatchable fuel? I know there was a presentation, this is my last part of this, there was a presentation that we received about a year and a half ago where the ERCOT was developing the design for incentivizing dispatchable energy, where there would be funds made available for the development of, but not sure of actually purchasing and then maintaining. So I'm interested in that to see how we can benefit from that Texas Fund, Energy Fund, but then specifically the Nuclear Energy Fund, which is being proposed as a separate fund that will be available. And of course, I'm assuming that CPS is in support of that and advocating for it.
So to answer that first part, yes, we did have a member on the Advanced Nuclear Working Group. That report has been released now, and there was a handful of legislative recommendations that I assume will be taken up this cycle and next legislative session. To answer the second part of that question, I'm going to turn it over to David, who's on our energy market policy team and can speak a little bit more about.
Yeah, so David Key, Director of Energy Market Policy. I think the question was on the Energy Fund. When it comes to nuclear plants and use in the Energy Fund, the Energy Fund was established for new generation, new dispatchable generation. It was not specific to a type other than being dispatchable, so nuclear would have qualified, but the timelines were very quick. The legislature wanted things to be put into place very quickly, so any new nuclear would not have made it based on the timeline to build them. So they weren't considered in that first tranche, but this new part that you're talking about, where they're developing another fund, it's potential that we'll be able to participate in that. And we would be advocating for those types of policies to move forward. We believe that we do need dispatchable generation, and nuclear is a good source of carbon-free dispatchable energy. So it makes sense to do that if the numbers make sense for new projects in ERCOT.
But on that first, on the Texas Energy Fund, the actual purchase of the natural gas resources that we just acquired.
Right, so those are for, the Energy Fund was specific to new build, and since those were
Okay.
existing, it wouldn't qualify.
I see, okay.
But
That's what I
in the
wanted
greater
to
scheme of
clarify.
things, if we buy these new other plants, then you free up capital to provide other folks the ability to build new. So it does help the system overall, so it's still a good thing to do.
Okay, so something to consider as far as you advocate, if that's something that can be factored in, if we're going to be seeking to do dispatchable, and that's a benefit, the maintenance of thereof, And even as they're choosing to keep the plant open, I know that there's a plan for how that's going to be paid for. The current Browning plant was scheduled to be closed if it stays open. How does that get funded, and how does it get more of our tax dollars or directly from us in trying to keep it open? Just a thought for advising the advocacy and adding that to that process.
Okay, thank you.
Zanir, thanks so much for your presentation. I have a landscape question, and then I'd like your perspective on something. How many utilities in Texas are publicly owned?
Don't quote me on this. I want to say it's in the 70s or 80s.
Percent or number?
Number. And
And
I don't know why
that's out of-
73 is sticking out to me, but don't quote me on that.
Okay, and that's out of a base of how many?
I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Would you say it's majority or minority?
I'd say that the MOUs are probably in the minority compared to the investor-owned utilities.
But it's close?
I'm not entirely sure, but
Okay,
I'll
okay.
have somebody.
David knows that, and actually it's 71.
So I'll try to help, but it's like you said, it's a landscape question, so it's a little nuanced.
I'm not looking for precise numbers, I'm looking
Right.
for rough.
Well, just as a matter of perspective, in ERCOT, we are a minority. We are 7% of the entire consumer base, but we're like the 6th largest transmission company, so we're a large transmission company. We're the 4th largest generator, so we're a large generator company. So there's some nuance there, but we're a large
Okay.
player, but as far as total customer base, we're only 7% of the total ERCOT customer base.
So my perspective that I'm looking for is, as I look at this list, the top priority in my mind, as I look at this list, is our business model, maintaining our business model. Because if we have that autonomy from a finance perspective and from a technology decision-making, right, it filters down to the other three. So my ask is, what's your perspective in the level of risk of that municipally owned business model? Will it persevere? What are the forces that are coming at us to put that at risk?
Yeah, a lot of those are, taking away that authority for the local governments to make that decision, for our board to be able to make that decision and taking it over to the state instead. So
But why?
Why? It just comes down to legislatures and legislators' opinions on municipally owned utilities. They might be served by a different one that they don't necessarily love, but here at CPS, we set an example. We're community first, and we think about the community in everything that we do, and thankfully, our Bexar County delegation members, they know that.
Do you see it at risk?
It's definitely always a risk for us anytime there's a legislative session.
I'm struggling to ask the right question. I'm trying to get to, is this something that you and the whole leadership of CPS are worried about?
Yes.
I can weigh in a little bit and say stuff
Thank
that
you.
you guys are too delicate to address. Crashing through feelings on the daily here for me. So I think that there's a couple of things that are at play. I think that in the area of policy making, politics always overlaps. So I will say there are a couple of areas, I won't call out anybody by name, where a local municipality and the state legislator might be at odds over political divisions that frankly have nothing to do with the municipal utility model. That's just the battleground we're on. So scoot those to the side and we just sort of go get them from the side. I also think that with respect to the home rule model, there are always going to be principled differences in belief about whether home rule is better than having everything be open to the market. I think, again, not based on a particular municipal entity or who's running the municipal entity, but on a belief of which system is better. Also, one of the absolute experts on the topics walked in, so Rudy, grade my paper. The question was, do we truly believe that an attack on the municipal owned utility model is always a real threat? The answer is, I think, yes, all the time. I was saying sometimes it's on political differences based on who the muni is and who's at the state level. Largely, it's on a principled belief of whether home rule is better or absolutely being open to the market is better. I will say we defend consistently, based on the proof of our ownership and of our existence, that we have been able to provide affordable gas and electric service to our community over the course of our existence in a way that I don't believe an investor-owned utility would be. We provide a tremendous benefit to the city of San Antonio, and I hate the term cash cow or golden goose, but that's exactly what we've been to the budget of San Antonio.
I agree with that, but I guess my question comes down to, is it a nickel and dime threat, or is it a not existing threat?
No, I think it is. So I do think it's an existential threat, meaning it's an attack on a principled basis, but it's absolutely real. Every single session depends a lot on what's going on in other places and what our most recent performance has been over the past 2 years over a number of areas. But I do think it's a real threat every single session, and it will remain so. Rudy?
Yeah, the main thing I would add is I think generally CPS Energy individually is very well thought of at the legislature. We've got a great brand. We provide a lot of reliability that the state benefits from overall. So I don't think they're after us necessarily. I think there's a negative dynamic between the state legislature and cities in general right now, that they're nicking away at the city's kind of original jurisdictional rights. But here's the caveat. All the legislators are customers of Austin Energy, and that is not a good dynamic. So when the legislature tries to do harm to Austin Energy, which they pretty much do every session, we end up having to go in and help kill that bill, because there's no way to write a bill that impacts Austin without it capturing us. Does that make sense? So that's the real threat. It's if they finally get a bill over the finish line that does something to Austin Energy that impacts us as well.
But it is more this notion of kind of nickel and diming that those rights versus saying, all right, no more publicly owned utilities, right?
Yeah, the legislature really can't do that. You know, the one way they can prompt it is to opt us into competition, and then the city of San Antonio has to decide what aspects of the business do we keep and what aspects of the business are too risky to subject our citizens to. So that's how they force divestiture, is they just opt you into competition, and then our community has to decide what parts of the business are going to stay in. Yeah, they could remain totally independent, and they could sell off generation. They could sell off the wires. They would probably divest to the retail company because it's too risky. So, you know, we would be in a whole different mode trying to value our business in pieces if we ever get to that place.
And just for clarity, I know that you guys got this lesson, but I always forget. The reason that we can remain fully vertically integrated is because we're municipally owned. For investor-owned utilities, you're not going to be fully integrated all the way through the stack. So we'd have to pick one and stick with that. That's what Rudy was talking about.
So net, Zanir, count on me to help you if there's anything I can do from a CIC perspective.
I appreciate it.
Zanir, before we move on to the next question, I just want to give Rudy an opportunity to address the CIC.
Of course.
I tried to make it last time, and I think I was a little bit late. I may have caught you at lunch. But again, in the new year, I just wanted to come and say thank you for your service to the new chair. Congratulations. And we look forward to working with all y'all. This year's going to be a big year for us. We got a lot of really strategic initiatives continuing to push our strategy along with the legislature. I think you've had an update on some statewide potentially, work that we're going to have to do at the Public Utility Commission a little later on this year, potentially, and just continuing to push our generation plan forward on all fronts. This will be a year, I think Shanna, we have to go back to the board and talk about STEP. This is year 3 of our 5-year deal. So the board will have an opportunity to mess with STEP if they want to. So I'm sure we'll come and give you all that presentation before we take that to the board. So again, I mean, there's never any shortage of work for us, but this is going to be a year where we've got some really big stuff that we're going to have to just keep pushing forward. But I just wanted to come by and say hi, see if anybody has any thoughts, questions, concerns that they want to raise directly to me. That's why I'm here. Yeah. So here's a plug. Here's a plug. We've got obviously we'll have a new mayor come, June or July, whenever that runoff is. So that is a big transition for us. Having the mayor will, has a lot of influence on how we set policy objectives for the organization. We've got a trustee position next year that will become open in the northeast quadrant. And if any of you live in that quadrant, I mean, this is a group that generally becomes, kind of a source of opportunity for board seats. So, if you live in Trustee Steen's quadrant, we will be going through that process probably starting in the summer. And if you're not in there, but you know somebody who you think might be a great CPS Energy trustee, the more we have, the better. That process will probably kick off, I would imagine, once we get the new mayor in place, and then we'll go from there. So that's kind of some, and then, next year will be Trustee Dr. Mackey's last year. So that quadrant will open up, for the following year in 2027, I believe. So we're going to have, the majority of our board will turn over in the next couple of years.
Rudy, I'll throw this one at you. We reformulated into the CIC recently, right? And that brings new opportunities and a little bit of need for clarity, right? But I'd like to get your perspective on like the top 2 things that you're expecting out of this group.
Well, I think, the board primarily is going to drive the activity level here, but obviously, we have influence on what the board is interested in. We're going to need to update Vision 2027 once we get past the Horizon 2050 stuff, which will probably happen at the end of next year. Latter part of next year, we'll start looking at that. So, what the RAC did was they basically went through the process to arrive at our current generation plan. We'll need to just kind of look at it and see what's changed, what needs to be revisited. Maybe we need to tweak, some aspects of it, and that'll be part of that process. So I think it's always good to have an updated 5-year strategy, in place. And that includes how we think about our rate structures. This year we'll get going on our ERP system. So, I committed to Dee Dee back then that it was technology that was really holding us back. But I think the community needs to have a conversation about what types of rate structures make sense for our community. We're predominantly low, middle income community. So how do rates impact people's affordability? Depending upon how rates are structured. How do we incentivize energy efficiency, which is the primary kind of driver of our conversation at the RAC is, are there other ways to do rates, that incentivize people to use less energy, which is a good thing. So I think that those 2 things are, really what will drive our, if we call it Vision 2030 or whatever we kind of transition to, those are things that should end up here along with everything else that we send your way. And I would just encourage you to continue to embrace the public aspect of, what we've tried to create in the CIC. I think it's been long overdue. I know it took us a lot to get here. We're still, determining how far, is appropriate, but I think we've come a long way, and I appreciate y'all's open-mindedness to it. Yeah, Chris.
Along those same lines, but more short-term, I think our next full meeting is in March. And I know we're in a La Nina, but that was also true in 2021. So let's say Mother Nature dishes out another surprise in February.
You'll be dealing with another CEO if that happens. So, but I'd be glad to try to take a crack at it.
Given what you remember and what you've seen and heard the last 3 years since then, Are there any thoughts on what the CIC in its new formulation could be doing in the lead up to that in terms of helping to get information out and serving as a link to the community that might be beneficial for y'all?
You know, I don't know, where's Melissa? Is Melissa here? Okay. I don't know that we've gone far enough in creating ways for you all to engage the communities that you actually represent, whether you're a district representative or whether you're an at-large representative. I know we invite you to the customer fairs that we do around the community, and a lot of you show up, and I really appreciate that. But I don't know that we facilitated how you get information back to your neighbors outside of just your normal channels, right? So I think there is more we can do there, to help facilitate that. But here's the thing. There's probably 3 talking points I use as it relates to extreme weather conditions, however they shape out. Number 1, we're in a better position we were 4 years ago. We're not in the same position in the way we're managing our infrastructure. We're not in the same position in the way we're communicating to our community. So we're generally in a better position. If we find ourselves in a situation like Winter Storm Uri, and we do have an emergency condition on the grid, I think we will manage it much differently than we did last time. Does that mean that we'll avoid outages? No. If ERCOT forces, rolling outages to protect the system, we got to do what we got to do. But I think the experience will be different. So the anxiety people have felt about being out for 4 days, which was absolutely unacceptable, and I've said it everywhere I've gone. I think the experience will be better. The 15 minutes on and off and however much time, people will be on, I think it'll be a much more deliberate process than it was last time.
We have time for one more question, but before we move on, I just want to tell you that you did receive in your email a toolkit that our communications department put together to help you better communicate with the people that you represent in your district, or if you're at large or however. That will continue to happen as we move forward with anything that goes on that deals with our utility. You guys will serve as a mouthpiece for what we do, and we'll continue to give you all of the tools that you need to make that happen.
Dr. Cantu, it's good to see you.
You as
Happy New
well.
Year.
Hey, Rudy,
Happy New Year, Rudy.
I got one more thing to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And a little bit more to what Chris is saying. At the last Board of Trustees meeting, there was a lot of discussion about getting more information, getting more public involved, and trying to get more information to the public. So what Chris is saying is we as a group, we're kind of at a loss too, and how do we get more information to the public or from the public, that sort of thing. The forum is good, but I don't know either. So maybe we could throw some ideas around in the future on how to try to do that a little bit better.
Here's just an example of ways that you can be impactful. One of the former council people invited me to the Pachyderm Club. I think I'm going to talk to them as a Republican group in town. I'm thinking I'm going to talk to them in early February. There are small pockets of, groups like that gather that you all are a part of. And my team will tell you there's no group, big or small, that I won't go talk to. I spend the majority of my time in the community, talking to anybody who has a thought that they want to share with me. So, breakfast clubs, however you spend your time gathering people and having conversations, the more I can get around, the better. So that's something I'll just throw out there. If you'd like for me to show up at whatever size community group that you're hosting, I'll be glad to go. Is that helpful? Yeah. Hold on. All right. Dr. Cantu had a quick question. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure how quick it is. One comment I had from a citizen, and I wasn't quite sure how to answer, or you may be able to. Since the city owns CPS, why then do we need to be a part of ERCOT, and why cannot we go to the other grids in the United States? And I did not have an answer for him, so I thought this would be a good one for me to get the information.
So, we're all, the ERCOT system is all interconnected, and there's no way to unconnect. It's like, saying which arteries to your heart do you want to disconnect? They're all connected. They're all required for our system to run. as reliably as it can possibly run. So there's no kind of islanding ourselves from ERCOT. That's just not a possibility. Now, with respect to the broader question about connecting to the grid, I think there are some efforts to force the issue. You got some utilities who are wanting to connect to other parts of the country. You know, we got there's Rio Grande Co-op out in West Texas is trying to connect to New Mexico. ERCOT's kind of, you know, not so supportive of that, nor is the PUC. And then you've got a big DC line that's being proposed from East Texas through Louisiana into, I think, Mississippi. And I can't remember the name of that line, but anyway, so there are a couple of efforts. I know Congressman Blanco, I believe, has filed a bill at the federal level to force the issue. You know, I don't know that that's going to go anywhere in a Republican Congress, but it's out there. And then the legislature has a big, you know, say in, you know, how much federal regulation they're going to be willing to take on. So I think the prospects for interconnecting to the national grid are slim. Doesn't say it's not a possibility. But I will say this, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, is getting much more forceful with the levels of reliability they think grids, you know, regional transmission operators should be maintaining. And so I think the more forceful FERC gets with whatever the solution might be, I think, you know, that'll have an impact on how possible it is. But there's just no one thing that will force the issue unless Congress really passes a bill saying you got to do it. And if you do it, by the way, here's, you know, and I think I've made comments at the legislature on this issue when you know, the legislators will mess with me when I'm up on you know, testifying, and they'll ask me these questions that they know are difficult questions. There's as much good that can come out of connecting to the national grid as there is bad. And here's so you're right, it wasn't a fast answer, but I'm going to give you my best shot. Their problems become our problems as much as their energy allows us to be more reliable. So, you know, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. And the process to actually interconnect, to get the systems to sync up, you have to take outages in other parts of the country to when you make the connection so that you can bring them back up and they can synchronize. You know, the way our electricity works, it's one big sine wave. And if those sine waves are not, you know, working together, then they can actually work against each other and impact reliability. So you got to actually take the other parts of the grid down and then bring them back up together so that they're synchronous. And that creates a whole different challenge that we don't really talk about. It's a more technical aspect of how we get there. But if we get there, that's going to be an issue that we have to manage. So, again, you know, if I'm kind of agnostic, whatever provides my customers with the best level of reliability, I'm good on. But I just think there are challenges with both. Yeah. Okay, I think they're gonna hold me off.
Can I just ask a quick question about the presentation?
Yes, we're going to get right back to the presentation. This is, you talk about dialing a friend to ask a question and have a subject matter expert. We had the subject matter expert. So y'all join me in thanking Rudy for taking time out to be here today. Thank you. We're going to bring that back to Zanir as soon as Melissa gets to answer part of the
Hi, everybody, again. I'll just close it out. I think I heard most between the third floor and here. But Mr. Fulton, thank you for the question initially, like how can you all help? And I think we talked about this maybe the first meeting. I think, Tom, you mentioned that too. Please share the information that we're posting on social media, that we're sending you all through those digital toolkits. I think that's the most important thing. I saw Chair Picasso share this information about this meeting today. Maria Nelson, I saw you share information about our color-coded conservation, so I want to thank you all for doing that. Our guests, too, we'd love for you all to make sure that you will follow us on social media and share that information. That's the most important thing in how you all can help us, so thank you.
So we're going to turn this back over to Zanir so that we can
I just
finish
want
up.
to, I just want to echo that real quick. I know that it's been an ask from us before, and so I just want to emphasize and thank the CPS Energy staff. They do try to do a good job at providing us with media toolkits so we can be able to share that with our communities. I do highly encourage, because we are a citizens input committee and we are here to also represent the citizens in which we are appointed to, whether that's an at-large position, a quadrant position, or a district appointment. I do highly encourage that not only are we going to the community to listen to them, but also sharing the information that we're receiving from them. So whether that's through your social media, or if you're a part of a neighborhood association or a coffee group like Rudy mentioned, I do encourage that we do try to get that word out there so folks do have an awareness of what's going on. I think that we have a really unique opportunity and responsibility to help them get that message out in areas that maybe there's a lack of access to. So if y'all need support with that, I'm happy to champion that.
Lawson, I wanted to say thank you for that, and also Deanna, Customer Strategy Officer. Another thing I would love to do is talk about ways to get more input from the community. A statistically significant sample size is usually about 500, but we'd love to have more people participate. And so, we sent out individual letters to every customer, letting you know what your, and I think that came out of RAC, right? So showing you what your step contribution is, what your annual usage is, what some of those other products and services that we have. Sent one out to everyone, however you received your bill. It's exactly how you received the letter showing that, and we encourage providing input to us. So I'd love for us, maybe as one of the customer working group opportunities, to see if we can kind of brainstorm some other options. We can talk about what we are doing, what we're looking at doing, and then maybe come up with a different way to help you get the input that you need to help when you bring it back to this group. So happy to take that as an action item, and happy to show up at whatever working group or CIC session that would be at.
Just to complement those two statements, which were fantastic, is we need to speak to people where they are. Right? Digital toolkit is fantastic. I think it's excellent, right? But that covers a segment of our population, right? So we need to brainstorm in that action, right? Trying to get to where they are, and maybe those coffee and neighborhood associations are those places, but we need to reach into that, because I think that's some of what we heard in our public comments is who we need to get that input from to care for.
And Chris, I think I had made a request personally about maybe, I know that in the MUC meeting, there was the mention of the door hangers that were going out with some of the weather assistance and services, and so I know CPS Energy had some material as well. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to get some printed material, because I do agree, I don't like the knee-jerk reaction of everything's on the website or it's digital. If 2020 and 2021 told us anything, there's still a digital divide, and there's a lot of our senior residents that I'm not going to expect them to get all their information from the internet. So if we can maybe have a further discussion about some printed material.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a couple more questions for Zanir, and then we're going to move on to new business so that we can get you guys out as promised at the end of the meeting and not this afternoon. So thank you all, though, for all of your input, and we really appreciate all of your participation.
Zanir, I have a question about employee safety. What in particular are you guys looking at the legislative level? What are y'all championing? Just kind of wanting to see what that looks like.
Yeah, so we're right now we're tracking some bills specifically on that Hurricane Beryl, what happened there, where the utility crews were being threatened and being prevented from being able to restore the power. So we're keeping an eye on those legislations. It seems to be something that's likely to pass this session, and we want to make sure our employees, our crews, when they go out restoring power, it's a stressful situation. We want to make sure that they are protected when they're doing such.
Thank you. We do have our last question here from Dr. Villarreal.
Yes. So in your pillars here, there's no item about environmental protection or climate change mitigation. Obviously, the legislature may think that they can ignore those issues, but we recently had major flooding in Houston again. We had record temperatures, so 2024 was the hottest year on record. You know, Sid Miller, the commissioner, agriculture commissioner, recently told the media that the state is running out of water. And so we know that CPS needs water in order to generate electricity, so that's a major concern. I'm disappointed that there is no element on here relating to environmental protection and also, you know, air pollution. So, you know, the Spruce coal plant is one of the major regional polluters, 7 million metric tons of greenhouse gas a year on average. And, you know, because Bexar County is now an EPA air quality non-attainment, in 2026, we're now going to have to be paying for tailpipe emission tests here locally, assuming nothing changes, okay? So, you know, I think it's a major oversight in this particular, you know, framework for your policy pillars. And, you know, I think it's an opportunity for CPS to engage with legislation because we know that the generation plan with renewable energy is a huge part of our how we're going to tackle climate change mitigation. There's a bill that's been filed that would require additional environmental and regulatory permitting for renewable energy projects, even though you know, that type of permitting is already required at the federal level. So, you know, what will you do and CPS's team do specifically during the legislative session to ensure that, you know, you're putting the environment and our climate change mitigation obligations in the scene?
Yeah, and you know, I want to kick off by just saying that these are kind of more so guiding priorities. They don't encompass every single thing, but I take that climate change into the reliability and resiliency aspect of it. You know, we want to make sure that the grid is ready to deal with anything that comes its way. And with that said, we support all diverse types of energy power generation, and CPS Energy has been at the forefront of, you know, researching and looking at these new technologies, and the legislature will be talking about those. Nuclear, geothermal, hydrogen, these are all going to be things that will be discussed, and we'll be keeping an eye on all of those going forward as well during the legislative session.
I turned my mic off. Thank you, Zanir, and thank you guys for all the questions. We're going to go ahead and move forward with the next agenda item, and that's going to be an update on the Municipal Utilities Committee, and that's going to come from our director.
Thanks.
So,
Good
Mr.
job.
Matt Jones.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are you doing? On December 9th of last year, the Municipal Utilities Committee, the MUC, at the City of San Antonio met to hear presentations from ourselves, SAWS, and the Emergency Operations Center. As background, if you all may remember, those of you all have been around on the RAC and the CAC before, the MUC was reconstituted by Mayor Nirenberg late last year, formerly chaired by Councilman John Courage, now chaired by Council Member Dr. Adriana Rocha Garcia. The four other council members are Councilmember Melissa Cabello-Havrda in District 6, Councilmember Castillo, Terry Castillo in District 5, Councilmember Mark White in District 10, and Councilmember Courage is also from D9, is also on the committee. Those are your 5 members. The MUC, as background, is charged with overseeing the implementation of programs and policies at our utilities, us and SAWS. That doesn't include items that traditionally goes before the whole council. So if you think about rate adjustments, board appointments, that kind of stuff, right? So at this December 9th meeting, there were presentations from each utility on winter preparedness, in addition to a deck that I presented on behalf of our Vice President, Kathy Garcia, outlining the formation of this committee, along with a bit of a historical context. That presentation was shared with each of you before, and y'all should have a copy of that in your inbox. Seeing Ned's heads nodding, that's good. And then I also want to take a moment to thank Mr. Fullerton, Mr. Onofre, Chair Picasso, Ms. Nelson, and Dr. Villarreal, who I remember seeing in the audience there for the meeting. It was good to see y'all there. I was glad to see y'all's participation there. For any of the public that might be listening to us online now or later, if you would like a copy of that presentation, you can always go to saspeakup.com. That's the city's website where all of those documents live, so that you can get access to that document as well too. Just look for the Municipal Utilities Committee posting. After the presentation that I gave, each committee member had a chance to ask questions and provide comments. And some of those were centered on the role of the newly created CIC subcommittees and the public's ability to participate in those. That specifically came from council members Cabello-Haverda, Castillo, and White, 3 of the 5 members. They expressed support for making those sessions publicly accessible with the use of executive sessions should the committee take up confidential or sensitive information. During that conversation, as they expressed this, I was asked to provide that feedback back to the committee, hence my long-winded speech. And so this is me providing that feedback back to this committee from those particular members. And before I stop, I'll say that, you know, the CIC bylaws lay out the names and composition and kind of minimum meeting cadence of these subcommittees, but they do not specifically address accessibility, right? The ad hoc committee that was formed to kind of help the CAC get to the CIC, you know, strongly felt, right, that those subcommittees be used as closed working sessions, which was really a time for the members to delve more deeply into technical matters, ask questions, learn, become educated on broader issues, things that would all allow them to be more prepared in their advisory role when they're actually making opinions and giving advice to our board in a full CIC meeting, which, like today, is open to the public, where all of those formulations and that advice happens. So I will stop there to say, if this committee feels differently than what has been formed up to this point, right, and you want to change that practice, that is perfectly within your scope to do so. And that's a conversation that I think this committee needs to have. And so I want to make that clear and provide that feedback and stop there and say, are there any questions?
What's your guidance?
My guidance is this committee needs to have agency. Personally, I'm taking Matt Jones' hat off. I'm taking my CPS hat off. This committee needs to decide its future. There was a group of this committee that was part of the transition committee that decided this, and for good reason at the time. This committee is now formed. There is no transition. This is the committee. And y'all have 19 members. And I think it's a decision y'all need to make.
Mr. Jones, could you remind us that those subcommittee meetings, our agendas are public?
The agendas are not public, but we do executive committee reports. So I'll post it on the website. You will see exactly what was talked about in a general format, much in the same way that we do for other subcommittees.
Yes, so thank you for the update for the CIC members who weren't at the MUC meeting last month. I mean, I would encourage anyone who is interested in what the dialogue about what the dialogue was at the meeting to go, and watch the meeting for yourself, at least the portion that discussed this particular item. But the consensus was, as far as I could tell from the pretty clear comments of Councilwoman Castillo, Cabello-Haverda, and Councilman White, and there was no major objection from the other 2 members of the committee. The consensus seemed that committee wants us to have our meetings open to the public. City Council kind of sets the tone for how local government interfaces with the public, and I think since we have been meeting since September, we've actually never had executive session in our full committee meetings, and I don't think, at least from the Power and Technology Committee, I don't think there's been anything presented in my subcommittee that would require an executive session. I might be wrong, but that's my opinion. I don't think there's anything that's been discussed that wouldn't be, in the purview of public transparency. So I personally, felt encouraged because I think it's an opportunity for us to be more open to the public if we have subcommittee meetings open to the public, and I think it would help us to resonate with the city council members and the subcommittee and the larger council that we have taken their advice and that we will make the decision to open those subcommittee meetings to the public. So I don't see any impediment to doing so, and I think hopefully in our next agenda item, when we review the bylaws, we can set that in as a new amendment to our bylaws.
Yeah, and not a question there, but I will answer that last part that you said. I don't think that requires a bylaw change. Y'all could do this by resolution if you needed to.
I just want to weigh in a little bit on a couple of your comments to make sure that there's clear direction from a governance standpoint. This committee is a board committee, so you are not a municipal entity. You are not bound by the Texas Open Meetings Act, and you do not report or have an obligation to the city council. I also want to remind you all that your fiduciary duty and your duties of good faith and representation go to CPS Energy and to its customers, not to city council. All of that being said, when you can say yes to anyone who's asking you for something and it is what you wanted to do anyway, my view is say yes, but I also wanted to me, the decision tree that you all need to go through when you're considering what it is you do as a committee is to decide if it's in the best interests of CPS Energy and its customers. Again, no governance requirements that are directed by council. There are also no governance rules that allow the MUC to direct CPS Energy or any of its boards. So their feedback is both useful and I think honestly their guidance and experience with dealing with the community is very valuable, so listen to it. Just wanted to be clear of who your obligation is to as you consider the question, which I agree is a good question and should be considered. Also agree does not require a bylaw change.
Mr. Fullerton.
While you have the microphone, a couple of procedural issues. If we were to open the subcommittee meetings, given those guidelines or lack thereof that you've pointed out, any suggestions on best practices in terms of notice and operations and making announcements at the beginning of subcommittee meetings if we were to open them up?
So I would say what I would do is be as consistent as you could be with past practice and with meetings that are subject to Open Meetings Act as we have been in the past. So I would treat them like you treat your full committee meetings right now. From a logistics standpoint, I think some of the changes that would be required is scheduling. As I understand, you have scheduled your subcommittee meetings to all occur at the same time. From a technology perspective and from a teleportation mechanism perspective, I think y'all can only be at one place at one time. And so if they were all going to be live streamed, then, and to me, I think there's a spectrum of things you could consider. You could post your agendas in advance and live stream and allow for time at the beginning to speak. You could do one, but not all of those things, all within your discretion, because again, it's not subject to the Open Meetings Act. I, again, tend to think if you do the same thing each time, predictability and expectations are a little more consistent with the public. I also think it is absolutely within your purview to say, no, when we formed the committee, we decided we did not want our committee meetings to be open because those are educational sessions and we want open and robust dialogue. And none of us ran for office to be on a municipal entity because we didn't want to run for office and be on a municipal entity subject to public scrutiny. We wanted to be on a committee. So I think that's also an option. But I do think the logistics one is one of the first ones we'd have to figure out. Scheduling for the subcommittees would not be done in the same way in which it was envisioned they would be done. And part of the driver, just to remind you all, when we did the conversion, was the feedback we received from many of the RAC members, not the former CAC, but the RAC members, was being there that often was a time commitment that was unreasonable given that these are volunteer positions. And so please set up a structure that allows us to devote one day in office a month to this cause, all inclusive. So that was sort of the drive, one of the drivers for the design that we picked for the committees and subcommittee structure.
And Shanna, I remember this discussion because we've had this before the new CIC was formed. So that's how we ended up with the subcommittees as they are, right? It is in education, it is informal. And I want to keep it the same because when we had the discussion with Rick and Anna, there was a lot of information that was exchanged. When that was first brought out to us, it was very rough. And if that gets open, I think there's misconceptions about it, what it is and what it isn't, right?
You all would not get those
we wouldn't get that. I know we wouldn't.
Early ones.
And we wouldn't get that. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. But we had a lot of input into that,
Yes.
which I think has made a better product for what Rick and Anna are going to come out to City Council or the board with. So I think there's a lot of value. And we had this discussion when we were forming the bylaws, and I think there's a lot of value in keeping it the way it is. I think there are venues that we can disseminate more information to the public from the committees, subcommittees, and I think we should do that, whether it's the monthly disclosures on the website or whether we just bring it to this group, once a quarter. It doesn't matter to me, but I think the format is acceptable, and I think there's ways that we can disseminate more information if we need to.
I think Matt said it great, that this is y'all's decision, so we can facilitate it whatever way you decide. I do think, when I say we couldn't give you the information, I want to make sure I'm very clear. We do not discuss confidential and proprietary information or have the discussions that are the creation and formation of policy in public, and we are not required to. No, those are exceptions to the Open Meetings Act for all entities. So those conversations still would not be in public. They would be in an executive session. So that's what I meant by we wouldn't be able to give it to you. I didn't want that to be confused with anything else.
So very briefly, we should probably map out the process at which we make that decision, yay or nay, but we should understand what we go through to do that.
So I just want to echo a lot of what's been said because there's a few of us here that were on the CAC when it was not open in any capacity. And I remember coming on and being a champion for it because it was right after Storm Uri, and there was a high volume of requests for us to be made available in public to the community. And so we did come up with some type of hybrid to that option. That weighed heavily into the design of this current committee, of making sure that we allowed for public comments to come to the larger, the meetings like we have today. The subcommittees, to quote Shakespeare, what's in a name? And they truly were to be working sessions for us to really iron out some of the nuances to be able to bring to the public a more fleshed out idea or proposal, right? And so that is not a unique request. That is something that City Council also has an opportunity to have, closed door discussions on. Dr. Viriali, you had mentioned the removal of the executive session from the agenda. That is something that I've already brought to CPS Energy staff, and we will be bringing that back on as necessary, so we can continue to have those discussions as a full group when there are issues or matters that CPS Energy would like us to have input on that are not ready. But I just want us to really consider the subcommittee meetings and their intent. Tom, I made an example of us to the staff when I was talking to them about how as a CAC, there were a lot of ad hoc committees or ad hoc groups that would come on, whether it was to talk about how we were going to be public, whether it was to talk about how we were going to discuss the bylaws. And you and I always seem to volunteer ourselves one way or another to be on those committees, but something like that. L in my name is for more than just Lawson, I guess. But those were not open to the public. And we were able to have real conversations of what we wanted the public to, how the public wanted us to look and what we were responsible for when it came to that. And so that's how we saw these subcommittees too, was to remove the opportunity to have to constantly have these ad hoc committees, because that was something that, the reason why, they wanted to kind of merge RAC and CAC to just being one instead of having to continue to develop committees. That's where this came in and why we have so many more positions here. So these are supposed to be working sessions. And if we need to consider, maybe it's a resolution or when we're discussing the bylaws or whatever that looks like, a name change to really define or to represent what that's supposed to look like, then we can have that discussion. Maria, I really appreciate that you brought up the question about agendas. I think that we do need to post at least very similar to this, just a rough outline of what we're supposed to be discussing, and allow an opportunity for the public to either submit comments or send an email of, hey, I saw this was an item, and if you guys are going to discuss X, Y, and Z, consider this. Like I opened up this conversation when we were talking about how do we engage with the community, what are we supposed to do? We are representing people, and so when we go into discussions, we are not talking on what's best for just Lawson. We are talking on what's best for the community we represent. And so we're not going to do that if we don't have an opportunity to have that discussion with the community, which is why I'm happy to see the evolution of the fear of opening up a meeting to now we have public comments, and that's within 3 years, I think it's been already. I don't know, time is weird. But I just want us to be cognizant of some things, and I think that that's a great opportunity for us to be able to receive input, is to be able to put the agenda up and then have an opportunity for, I think that there's an email address, right, that folks can share, okay, to be able to receive any input or anything that they would like us to consider when we're looking at that. And then just, this is going to be the first full year that we are a CIC. There's going to be some bumps on the road. We are not going to be perfect. This is a learning curve for all of us. And as the chair, it's both exhilarating and a little nerving. So bear with me while we all learn to understand what this wants to look like. Again, there's a lot of new faces, and I'm really, really excited to have the different perspectives on here. But just to give some background on where we were and where we're at, and maybe just come to some middle ground of an opportunity for us, I think is what I would really like to see in this discussion. I don't think that we're going to solve everything in this conversation, but I'd like for us to just continue it. And I know that, another new business item is the bylaws. And so really just want to start for us to be able to compile input, comments, public feedback, committee feedback to how we do these things, so we can ensure that we're putting our best foot forward. As Shanna had mentioned, we are here to represent the customers of CPS Energy and do it in a way that is in everybody's best interests. If everybody knows how the sausage is made, it might panic a lot of people. So we just want to make sure that everybody is getting the best bratwurst that they can, right? So that's just kind of where I'm at on it. I would like to see or just start discussing about agendas being posted for this, or see what that looks like. I know that there may just want to see just if there's any type of legal hurdles that we need to look at, but that's kind of in a nutshell, bunch of Post-it notes in my brain.
And to answer your question directly, Tom, about the process, it'd be a resolution. So it's up to this committee to decide when and how, but a resolution with the support of the majority.
Is the MUC expecting a response from us regarding this?
No, I will provide them the response. I will provide them a clip of this conversation. I will provide them the agenda that shows that it was on the agenda for today, and tell them the timestamp or where they can watch this conversation.
Yeah, but I would say, just in reaction, right? I agree with everything Lawson said, but we need to really think through this, right? And I don't want to knee jerk today and say, okay, we're open, given all that deliberation that happened prior, right? So I think it really makes sense for us to think about this, and that goes to the process, right?
Yeah,
I
we'll
just-
defer to the committee on that process and how y'all want to handle that.
Thank you, Lawson. I'm sorry, I missed some of it, but I know you were discussing some of the history of that as well. And I think also historically, Winter Storm Uri was brought up previously, and one of the big takeaways from that, and I'm glad that Rudy talked about some of the lessons learned from that, but one of the big takeaways was the lack of transparency. So I think we always have to keep that in the back of our mind, that the community took away that from what happened during the winter storm is CPS and the lack of transparency. And I think they've done a lot to overcome that, but we always need to keep that in the back of our mind as well. Thank you.
I just want to echo some of the things that have been said because I had the same concerns as a former member of the CAC, and part of that task force with Lawson, with Tom, and with others is that I've felt very strongly that we needed an open organization or an open but I've worked for almost 20 years at a public entity, and I recognize also that there's a lot that comes before an open meeting happens. And some of that is staff-driven and leadership-driven, and some of it is community-driven still. So I think it's part of a larger conversation, but I do, I'll admit ignorance that I wasn't aware until fairly recently, because we're a new entity, that our subcommittee meetings were not, agendas were not public. And I understand that sometimes those subcommittee meetings, part of the larger discussion is the presentation material, the content of those meetings. That's the bigger discussion this group has to have. But in terms of the agendas themselves, and in terms of, I was going to suggest the same thing, Lawson, about having a public input entity. If we post the subcommittee meeting agendas, to have a public input opportunity when the agenda is posted to know that we'd like to see comments about or questions about the things that are going to be discussed in those subcommittee meetings. Is it possible to vote on that at this moment and I don't know how the committee feels about that at this moment, but simply starting with the next subcommittee agenda next month, just to post it. I mean, it's a start, and it's again, it's a larger discussion, but I don't know how the committee feels about that.
Also coming from the RAC and having that transparency there, and I really appreciate the task force work to create the CIC. I know you went and deliberated through this process, and I'm torn because of the transparency component and understanding the need, but I really appreciate and agree with the need for that opportunity to flesh it out before it comes to the public, but having the agendas available and what you just shared, Richard, with being able to get that feedback going in, I think that would serve us well. So that's my position.
Just a quick follow-up. Sorry, I apologize, Christina. The process we went through as we started this with the discussion of the Solartricity, Windtricity, and LCP Green was illuminating, because that did come first. It really was a model for the start of this new entity, because the initial presentation came to this group. For those who don't know, and our guests here today, it came to this group. We started to tear it apart politely within this group, and then we were asked and agreed to and wanted to go into further discussion and more intense feedback and more, as Shauna said, more robust, candid discussions in our subcommittee's working groups. And I think that there was a lot of value, I wanted to add, in being able to have those candid conversations in that setting. But it was public in the sense, first off, we're not a decision-making body. We can advise. And so that's just an important reminder that nobody's stated yet. But it came here publicly. We were able to workshop it within a reasonable time frame and bring it back so that recommendations could be made to the board of CPS. And that process, we got a taste of it, and it worked. So I'm not going to forget that it worked within this entity, but I think that there is still ability for at least to know. I would have liked to have known, I didn't know the LCP Green program going into all of this. I wasn't that familiar with it, admitting ignorance. But I would have liked to have known the public's concerns or questions before we went into subcommittee. That would have been nice, so that to have known that they had the ability to see the agenda and to submit any considerations. So.
So again, I'm really happy with the beginning of this conversation. It's, again, we're not going to find a solution today, but I do think that there is, based on the discussion so far, there seems to be some consensus on wanting to post the agendas for the subcommittee meetings. So I'm happy to take a motion for agendas to be posted for subcommittee meetings at this time.
I brought it up, so I so move.
Okay. In a second. All righty. At this point, I'd like to take a hand vote. So if everybody can just raise their hand to have the agendas posted for the subcommittee meetings. Over for yes, to approve it, yes. Oh, and me too. And then to not have them posted? Okay, 2. I think the ayes have it. Okay. Then we will ensure that we have those agendas posted for the subcommittee meetings going forward. Will that start with this current one? Okay, it'll start with the next one. Okay, all righty. Then, and again, this is a very new structure for all of us, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again in this meeting. I'm encouraged and excited to see that we had, I believe it was 3 individuals show up for the public comments, and I hope to see that grow so we can continue to harvest that public input to develop a committee that works, that benefits everybody. So thank you.
Could I make a comment, please? So, something that Mr. Jones said, that opening the subcommittee meetings to the public would not require a change to the bylaws, then that means that the bylaws as they are written mean that the subcommittee meetings are open to the public. And so Section 12, paragraph F, it says, meetings of the CIC are open to the public except for any closed meeting or session as defined by Texas Open Meetings Act. So if it doesn't require a change to the bylaws, then subcommittee meetings are open to the public, and I don't see any conflict, and I don't see any reason why we're not operating already in that.
I will reach out to Ashley for an answer, but I do believe that that has to be a consensus amongst the group. So, in the interest of time.
Yes, Ashley Glotzer, sorry, Legal Department. The section that you're referring, I don't have them in front of me, is about CIC meetings. There's a separate article on the subcommittee meetings, and that subcommittee section is silent as to whether the subcommittee meetings are open or closed. But the CIC meetings, this meeting of the full, was intentionally, that language in there is that they are open.
So I would submit, because the other section does not explicitly state, as you mentioned, that whether the meeting is open or not is governed by Section 12, paragraph F, that the meetings are open to the public.
I'm having a hard time reconciling the CIC because that section also says that the meetings have to be held on Wednesdays and at 12, and there's other.
Well, but paragraph F does not mention that. It just says meetings of the CIC are open to the public.
Yes, but I would read all of that section together. I can't isolate like a subsection F. But I agree with what's said. It's your decision to move forward on how you change it. I mean, as of now, the subcommittees are silent as to whether that was there. That was something that you all discussed, and it was a decision of the CIC to not make them public. So, and I think we're at that decision point again, and however you all want to handle that going forward.
So, and also Article 4, Section 2, subcommittees, that gives the structure of the subcommittees. But as you mentioned, there's nothing explicit about the meetings. So I go back to the point that the meetings are governed by Section 12 of the bylaws, and paragraph F says meetings are open to the public.
With respect, please. No, I thought you were done. No, with respect, I feel, I understand. I'm not a fan of being bound by the letter of the law rather than the spirit. And I feel like in practice, I feel like the bylaws personally don't specifically state it. So we adopted a practice, and that practice is what defines that right now. And I do think we've started the process to open up the discussion of that process and that practice. But I don't feel like we should be beholden by that just because the bylaws don't explicitly say one way or the other.
Well, that's a matter of sophistry, in my opinion, because if we're following the bylaws right now in this meeting that we're having now, which is open to the public, then I submit that the other meetings should also be in keeping with the practice that we have laid out right now, in that this committee meeting, full committee meeting, is being held in accordance with the bylaws. Ergo, our other meetings should also be held in accordance with the bylaws. We're not going to change the next full committee meeting to be private, right? To be not open to the public, because we're in keeping with the bylaws. So, and going back to my original statement, what Matt said, that if opening the subcommittees is only by resolution, then the bylaws as they are written allow for the subcommittees to be open to the public.
I just want to make sure that sorry, I stepped out. I want to make sure I understand the question. I do, so I think that ultimately, the structure and whether the timing of making a change is not subject to direction by any single member of the committee. I think that as the chair, you have appointed committee chairs, sorry. I think that they have the discretion to hold their subcommittee meetings as they wish. I would also let y'all know, I do not think that we could probably facilitate a change in the room assignment, schedule, and technology on a super short basis, but I would say give us 45 days and we could do that. But I do think that it's within the chair discretion to determine, but would require a resolution that needs to be agendized, held in a full committee meeting, and then voted on. I hope that helps.
No, thank you, Shanna. And again, this is the start of the discussion, and it's a good segue point to other new business items, which is the discussion of the bylaws review. Considering that the bylaws were initially reviewed from an ad hoc committee, and as I mentioned, the idea for subcommittees and executive members was to remove the need to continuously put together ad hoc committees. The proposed idea is that the bylaws be reviewed by the executive leadership team, which is created and encompassed by the chair, the vice chair, and the chairs of the subcommittees as well, to review that. Now, that does not mean that they are the only ones to have opinions and comments when we are looking at the revision or consideration of changes to the bylaws. It just means that they're going to be the ones to really help to be the vessel of communication for those. So subcommittee chairs and chair and vice chair, it is our responsibility to this committee to be able to receive any input, including some exactly like this, when we are having discussions, when we're looking at it. Bylaws, I say this all the time. Any type of policy, bylaw, document of structure should always be a living document. It should not be something that we create, and we put on a shelf because we were happy with it 5 years ago. If it needs to change, it should change, which is where we are today. We are here in a public setting because we saw that there needed to be change to this committee. So in that same nature and in that same tone, when reviewing the bylaws based on today's conversation and in further conversations, I encourage those that know their subcommittee chairs and contact me, please, to please provide us with any input as we start to have those discussions. But that is on that, and I'll open that up to questions if you want to as well.
Madam Chair, two quick points of clarification. One, was the decision made yet, following up on last month's meeting, about the existence of the position of immediate past chair and extensions for that person? And then two, just a suggestion, I'd like to encourage the chairs of the subcommittees, perhaps, at the beginning and the end of each of your subcommittee meetings for the next several months, maybe the next year, as part of that ongoing organic learning process, to ask the members of the subcommittee to keep in mind during the discussion and then review at the end of the discussion what might have been discussed. Assuming we move forward now with the closed meeting format as the default, what might have been discussed that day that would have needed that closed meeting protections, or if not, make note of that and then maybe circulate that back to the executive committee, which I guess is functioning as a de facto governance committee?
Yes, no, so I do have a resolution to discuss Diana's opportunities on the CIC. So we will get to that point. And I just also want to mention, we haven't even been able to get through a whole year as a CIC. So we don't even know what works and what doesn't yet in this process. And I really, really encourage everybody to let's get through a year and then let's do a postmortem to see everything that doesn't work or does work, right? I want to really see the basis of this in action, and I don't think that we fully have had an opportunity to do that yet. But to the resolution, we do have a resolution. I need to read this in full? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. Actually, before I get to this, I'd like to also talk about our vice chair. I don't know. VC, VP, tomato. Steve has graciously accepted his voluntold to be the vice chair for this committee, and will also remain on as the chair for his subcommittee meeting. So there is that announcement. So congratulations, Steve, you're stuck with me.
I just want to know that you guys to know that you have done what I knew could be done at any time throughout my life and through my career. When somebody leaves the room, you can do that kind of thing, and then they have to react to it. I'm sorry I was out of the room. In fact, I was out of the country when you did that. But I do have, and I've asked the executive committee if there was a problem for me to continue with the subcommittee, because we just barely got started, and I would like to continue on that. And I see as the vice chair position is so much less than the chair. The chair has a tremendous responsibility, and I know Lawson needs to be focused on that, and I'm here to support her. But I believe that at least going in, and we'll see, and I'll change this at the pleasure of the group. I would like to continue chairing the subcommittee, because, like I said, we're just getting started, and would like to keep going. So with your okay, I'll do that. But I'm not sure whether to thank you for making me the vice chair. I'll hold that decision till later. But but I thank you. I appreciate your confidence. Unless it was just like nobody else in the room wanted the job.
I did speak up for you, and I said I'm not sure he wants to do it, so let's wait until.
Thank you.
All righty. With that, I would like to just wrap this up, because I know folks have to leave. We do have a resolution on immediate past chair Diana Aguirre Martinez, and I'm going to go ahead and read that now. Whereas in April 2024, the CPS Energy Board of Trustees voted to amend the Citizens Advisory Committee, CAC, bylaws and establish a Community Input Committee. Whereas the transition from the CAC to the CIC created incompatible terms for at least one member for the current executive committee. Whereas the CIC bylaws state a member cannot serve more than 3 complete consecutive terms on the CIC for a maximum of 6 total years. Whereas the CIC bylaws also state the immediate past chair, having concluded their term as CIC chair, shall serve as the immediate past chair for a 1-year term. The immediate past chair is not elected annually, but rather serves as an officer as a function of their previously elected position. Whereas the CIC bylaws further provide that the duties of the immediate past chair include, but are not limited to, serving on the executive committee. Whereas Diana Aguirre Martinez has fulfilled her 6 total years, but is not required to serve as the immediate past chair for a 1-year term on the executive committee. Whereas the majority of the Community Input Committee recognizes that it is common practice for organizations to extend term limits for members serving in an executive committee role, and that it is in the best interest of the CIC to maintain continuity of membership at this time. Whereas Diana Aguirre Martinez is willing and able to serve an additional 1-year term to fulfill her obligation to the Community Input Committee and the Executive Committee. Whereas District 3 Councilmember Phyllis Viagran, who originally appointed Diana Aguirre Martinez, is supportive of the course of action. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Community Input Committee will allow Diana Aguirre Martinez to serve one additional year beginning on January 8th, 2025, to fulfill the immediate past chair role as part of the CIC's Executive Committee. Do we need a vote? At this point, I will open the floor for a motion to approve the resolution to allow Diana Aguirre Martinez to sit as the immediate past chair.
I just had a question. So, Ms. Aguirre Martinez is the District 3 appointee, correct? Will there be a new District 3 appointee?
So we can open up comments after we get a motion, and then we can open it up for that just
Okay,
by process. So I had a motion and a second. Okay, and then, sorry, Dr. Virial, the question was?
Yeah, so will we have a new District 3 appointee?
No.
The District 3 representative has agreed to allow her an extra year in that position, but we did get buy-in from our District 3 councilwoman.
Okay, yeah, so that's just the clarity that I
Yes,
was asking for. So this motion is that Ms. Aguirre Martinez will continue as the District 3 representative for an additional year and will serve as the immediate past vice chair.
Shannon, that's correct, right?
Past chair.
Along those lines, just on clarification, since we're setting the, oh, I guess, well. Just for clarification, since we're setting the precedent, I guess better to clarify now than when we get to a tied vote at some point later in the years. This does not create an additional one-year position for the committee, is that correct?
No.
So that person will continue in their prior position so that they will continue to have full voting membership as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, then I am going to open it up for a vote. All in favor of the resolution of immediate past chair to extend to 1 year for Diana Aguirre Martinez, raise your hand in support. Okay, and if I can get a raised hand for those opposed to it? Seeing none, it passes.
Motion passes.
Alrighty.
And it is 1:15.
It is 1:15, so I would like, if there's no more comments or questions on this item, then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, guys. Happy New Year.
Thank you all so much for your discussion today.